Good morning, everybody, still. Marketing guy in front of me, it was marketing that made me put this picture up and call myself the big daddy of big data. So I turned up at my job on January the 4th to run this business, and they said, Chris, you've got to blog this year. And I said, but I was born in 1965, I don't understand blogging. And they said, and you are now going to be the big daddy of big data. So anyway, but I've run a number of businesses for EMC, ranging from, I ran Ireland as a country, I ran their services business, which was 150 million. I've written a number of business cases. I spent 8 years in consultancy, which is all just about writing business cases, and also wrote a number of, for investments, for VC funding and ventures. Do I know everything about writing a business case? Absolutely not. Yeah. Do I get them refused still? Less and less every day, and the reason why less and less every day is I actually qualify out of some of the things I'm going to put forward. So what I wanted to offer you today was some considerations of what you might want to think about as you're building your business cases. And some of this is applicable to big data specifically, and some of this is just applicable to business cases. So first one that's very interesting is data is not yet an asset on the balance sheet. And this is a conversation that's been going on at the World Economic Forum in Davos for the last 2 years. When should we put data as an item on the balance sheet? And until it becomes an item on the balance sheet, which will make it somewhat easier to actually quantify what data is, it's still always going to be a challenge with certain people in your organizations who you have to persuade. Yeah? A number of people who may be from the financial organizations, yeah, will look at things in a certain way. That isn't on the balance sheet. That isn't an asset. So one of the things you have to do, and it is really up to you, is to join the dots for them. Yeah? Is to absolutely join the dots. And this is my Derren Brown moment. Is anybody thinking of Hadoop at the moment, at this point in the room? Anyway. But you really have to join the dots. And I learnt this lesson big time, about 8 years ago when I was putting a business case together for Marks and Spencer's. And I was presenting to a guy I now know well, the CTO, Pete Fox, and it was an organizational change business case. And I thought I had everybody bought into the business case, everybody around, and I went to Pete with his team to present the business case. And I started at a point of presenting it, making a massive assumption that he knew that his people had actually briefed him beforehand. And I turned up, and I started presenting it, and he asked me one question that I hadn't brought the specific fact for that. I didn't think I needed the fact in the presentation. I'd got so wedded to what I was going to say, and I couldn't answer the fact for him at that point. And literally, the presentation stopped, and I went into a week-long series of meetings with Pete, because he wanted to do the program, but he wanted to be persuaded that that was the right thing to do. And I ended up going back to the beginning and joining all the dots for him. And instead of doing that in 5 minutes at the presentation for him, it took me a week of meetings and really put at risk the whole project. It really is, in this world we live in, up to us to go and join the dots. Do not assume that somebody in marketing is going to join the dots for you. Do not assume that the CFO is going to join the dots for you. The other thing, Steve Jobs, I always like reading Steve Jobs, and if you read his, he's got a great book they put out about how he presents and what he does. He talks about you've got to start with the customer experience and work back to the technology, not the other way around. The number of consulting teams who would come to me and say, I'm about to present this to the client, and they'd start presenting about the technology. And I'm saying, what does that mean to that person that you're absolutely going to, and Peter was talking quite a lot about the customer experience and starting with the customer experience. I'll give you an example of that. This guy is Ajay Chopra. Most of you will not have a clue who he is. He works for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. When you were the country manager of Ireland a few years ago, this was a very important person to the country. He was the guy that was going to come along and write the check that underpinned the bailout of the Irish Republic. That is him. That's him on the right. That's him on the afternoon. He's about to go into a government building to actually finally say, yes, you've got the money, you've got the bailout. That morning, I was sitting with the head of Treasury, the head of NAMA, who's the asset management agency, speaking to them about a business case. And you think, hold on a second, shouldn't they be focused on actually getting the bailout signed off? Why are they talking to you about a business case that morning? And this is the key thing. from the customer experience, they'd already sorted out their funding problem. He was either going to sign the check or he wasn't, yeah, and it was quite likely he was going to sign the check. So they'd moved on in their customer experience to the next thing that they needed to focus on. Yeah, everybody else, the newspapers and everybody was talking about this, but actually their mindset had moved on. And the government at that point were only interested in one thing, and I can tell you now, most of your CEOs and most of your board is only interested in one thing. It's about growth. And that's where the big data comes in, because the big data drives the growth of the business. And it's having that growth conversation that allowed us to go, while in the afternoon they were going to go and sign the paperwork, I'm sitting in Government House with all the heads of state of the Irish Republic sitting there, and we're having a conversation around how do you grow a business. Just to give you an example of what we were talking about, you know, you're going to sign this piece of paper, and then you're going to have to grow the business. Your people are leaving the country in droves. How do you keep them in the country? How do you keep them innovating in the country when liquidity and getting cash is part of an issue in the thing? Well, maybe if we help you build a cloud for Gov, where you can take small and medium businesses, take open source developers and integrators and give them a playground where they can develop on their ideas and move their ideas forward that will keep jobs in the Irish Republic, allow you to grow the economy, collect more taxes and get you out of the cash crisis you're in. That's why they were having the conversation with us, because we were talking to them about growth. Whereas everybody else in the Republic at the time was talking about how do you save, you know, cut costs. And actually, they had that sorted because they were going to get the cash flow was going to sort, and their next issue was growth. And that conversation started a few years ago. Here it is. That's the Minister for Energy launching this in the middle there about 4 months ago. So it took a long conversation from that first conversation. So the conversation I had was the first conversation we were having. And it's taken, you know, about 2 or 3 years to actually go through a government process, but keeping the conversation focused on growth. Yeah? If you keep the conversation focused just on cost reduction, and that is important, I'm not going to say cost reduction isn't important, but if you keep it focused solely on cost reduction, well, you're going to talk to a certain person in the company, and you're not going to talk to the senior board. So that was a conversation we had with the Prime Minister and various other people. So this is a question I often ask both consultants who used to come to me, and it was, can you articulate your client's business model? But whenever I'm asked to go into a client and run a workshop, this is the first question I'll ask in the introduction. And I'll do it in pairs. So I'll say, will you two pair have a conversation? You introduce yourself to Peter, and you introduce yourself, and you introduce yourself. And I say, while you introduce yourself, can you articulate your company's business model, how you make money to your pair? And it is absolutely astounded. I am astounded by the number of either discrepancies between the group that come back or that they absolutely cannot articulate their company's business model. I'll put the challenge out to you today. If I stop you outside and say, can you articulate your company's future business model, can you really do it? Because if you can't, there is no way in a million years you're going to get a big business case past somebody, because you won't sound as if you do it. Can you really articulate your company's business model? And can the people around you articulate it? And can the people you're helping you, the vendors and those people, can they help articulate your company's future business model? So the next thing that I coming to us to make it that, is this a data-enabled business model innovation? And some of the early presenters talked about business model innovation, and the focus should be on that. And is it a data and can you answer that question? And if you can answer these questions, well then, okay, I'm getting to articulate a fairly good business case. And at the last presentation I did, I talked quite a bit about this. Here's one of the big models that are innovating in the world, which is the long-tail business model. Yeah? And do you understand what the long-tail business model will do for your company if they so choose to go it? And you can talk about microfinancing, and you can talk about Wonga.com. Everybody seen Wonga.com? Yeah? Do you know what the APR Wonga.com are now charging? 4,700%, I think it is. Yeah, I was meeting with Barclays the other day, and I said, so what's the APR on your credit card? And I think they said it was 31% or something at the time, and they're getting charged from the regulator. Yeah, and they're getting, and Wonga aren't getting contact. Wonga run a long-tail business model. Yeah, Amazon long-tail business model. Do you understand what a long-tail business model will do to your business? Will allow you to charge these APRs. It will allow me to do these location-based services to very specific people and therefore charge them or send them an advert to their phone that is actually particularly focused to them. Can you do that? And then can you translate that back and say, and this is why you need the data to do this, because the data you've only got at the moment allows you to do this marketing. It doesn't allow you to do across all the data sets. Can you have that conversation, and can you link it up to the business model and that business model for growth? That would be the things I would challenge you. Here's an interesting one for us all in the room, yeah? I run a software company now, open source, yeah? I often wake up at night saying, how am I going to make any money and feed the kids, yeah? And this type of stuff, yeah? But open source is an interesting thing because we embrace it immensely as a company. But you'll go to your boss, and one or two things might happen out there. He'll say, oh, this investment's a bit much. Can't we go to open source? Everything's free, isn't it, nowadays? I'm on the web. And then other ones will say, actually, I'm a bit worried about that open source thing, because open source means bugs to me. Why will I put my critical hospital on open source software? But whatever happens, both for the vendor side and the customer side, open source is going to be a big thing in the future. So you better be able to, when you articulate your business cases, understand where open source is going to play and where maybe open source isn't going to play. Yeah? Because most CEOs I've met want to buy, enterprise CEOs actually want to buy from other enterprise organizations. Yeah? And I think one of the guys earlier put up the adoption curve, and the people in the early adoption curve, a lot of the open source stuff, yeah? But the enterprises are coming behind. And I know my CEO, yeah, he likes to do, the comment he is, I like to do business and do business with us, yeah, one of the comments he made. So open source is going to be something you'll need to consider. I want to offer you this concept. Something fundamental happens at the transitions. I want you to think of this, and I'll explain what I mean. Whenever there's a wave of technology change, and here's the last few waves of the technology change, and I was born around the mini computer time, yeah, and really came into the world just before the PCs were launched. When at IBM we launched a laptop that I couldn't even carry from here to the other side of the stage. But in between each of these waves of technology, something fundamental happens at the transition, that new business models are created. New business models are created. And we're at another fundamental wave of technology as we go into big data. So now is the time for a new business model to be created, a new business model. And I'll give you one example out. This is Max Hopper. Max Hopper ran, he was working for American Airlines, and he did the Sabre system. I don't know any old enough to remember the Sabre system and how that revolutionized the airline industry. He was actually a CIO, CTO at that time. And he noticed that with the innovation and this change of technology wave, that he could help revolutionize American Airlines, who were a tiny little airline at the time, and suddenly got to a point where actually the system that he suggested to them was actually more profitable and more valuable than actually the airline itself at one point in time. But he was able to understand that when you get a change, a wave in technology, that's when you get the business model change. Big data is that wave of change of technology. So therefore, there must be business model change coming in, whether they're moving to long-tail business models. The other one is an opt-in, opt-out model. How do you get people to opt in and opt out of your model? I'll talk about that in a minute. So there's a number of different business models. Can you articulate those, and can you articulate what your company's future business model will be? And to help you do that, here's an interesting model. It may be better if that bottom slide there said current. But most change programs and around business cases, they take an S-curve and they take a value where you're running your old IT model and you're running your old business model, and they're running quite together, and somebody will bring innovation in. That could be a mini computer, it could be big data, it could be cloud computing. And somebody will bring that in, and then what happens is someone in the business, or it gets explained to them in some way, actually starts seeing that we can change our business model at that time, and we can have a business transformation program. We can change what we do. Then, as you get to the new model and you get your new business model, then you move into a thing where you can just do optimization. All you can do is just do optimization at that point. You're just optimizing what you do. So let's put those together and look at a transition from one to the other. So here's an old world, and here's where I take a new technology. So I'm in my old world and I'm doing IT optimization. I bring in the new world, big data. And I've got a new world, so I'm bringing that innovation in. And at that point, at that transition point, and this is where the Max Hoppers and the guy who ran Frito-Lay, James O'Leary, I think it was, these are the people who realized that at that point, your business model and your business case has to address the triple challenge. The triple challenge of just not optimizing. You've got to optimize the existing model. I've maybe got to innovate to solve some pains, and I've also got to look forward to how I deliver business value. And the people who can address those triple challenges, and I say it's a CEO conversation, it's a senior conversation, will absolutely win the day. Because they're the people that will bring the innovation in, and in a way of being able to, how can we take advantage of that? Another way of looking at it is you could say that traditional BI, EDW is focused on optimization. So it's focused on selling to this part of the curve, as opposed to this part and the business transformation part. And this is the thing that big data will allow you to do. It will allow you to change your business model. It should, at the same time, also allow you to optimize what you currently do, maybe allowing you to work over a bigger data set than you couldn't work at the moment. So it's going to optimize what you currently do, but also it's going to allow you to change your business, because I'm going to be allowed to be able to bring in new data sets or run new analytics or whatever that may be. What's interesting, I'd always talk to a CEO about this, just to bring it home to them, that this is a scale-out challenge. That if I just throw more technology, that's why it's not a technology play. Moore's law, whatever that is, times 2, I think, cannot deal with times 40 or times 50 data growth. Because the data is getting bigger, the mathematics, the analytics is getting bigger, the rapid adoption and the scalability. So, just by this one slide, most business people can look at this and say, I now understand what you're saying. If I take the same approach, I'm not going to get that business innovation. I may get some IT optimization, but I won't get innovation. Yeah? And so it comes back to this slide is, it tells you why Moore's law will help you here, but it won't help you shift into the new world. So you want to be focusing areas up here on, like the predictive use case I talked about, I think last time, about individual risk premiums per drive. Insurance companies now, the law's changed on them. They can't discriminate on sex or age anymore. So how do I can't optimize my current model, because actually I've got to have a new business model. And how does big data allow me to move forward and put telemetry in the car, and putting this telemetry and being able to analyze it will allow you to give you a risk premium in time per drive, per person, and then allow you to do a long-tail business model on risk. Are you having those conversations with that? And what's interesting, this whole thing to do this data science thing and this business analytics thing is a team sport. If you are walking in to present your business model and you're the only person there presenting it, you are in trouble. Yeah? Is there a data scientist with it? Is there a business person with you? Is there an analytics person with you? Is there a database person? This is a team sport. And the greatest example I can give you of this, of a complete failure in this area, would be Connecting for Health. So Connecting for Health, we spent taxpayers' money, so I say we spent, and I pay tax here, £12 billion on Connecting for Health. And I think all the majority technology companies walked away from it when I look at the headlines, yeah? And I look at that and I think, how the hell can that be? Because the number one issue that any government has at the moment is that the maximum amount of their GDP, 18% of American GDP is spent on healthcare. 80% of that is spent on the chronic diseases. 36 million people will die this year, from one of the chronic diseases. 300 million people have diabetes. 15% of the Kuwaiti nationals have diabetes. The cost of doing those, you fundamentally have to look at healthcare in a different way. And the way to look at healthcare in a different way is to have a single patient record where you don't get the silos looking at them. You look at the person in totality for the total experience, not just I'm your primary physician or I'm your person who's taken your x-ray or whatever, yeah? And then when you add genomic data in there, this suddenly expands into a huge data challenge. But we spent 12 million and we got nowhere. And it's interesting because I'm working with a company now to roll out something globally who's actually been paid by the Kuwaiti government and by the Scottish government and the Scottish to actually do this. Because what they've put together, when I take it as a team sport, their business is made up of 40 clinicians, senior professors in all the chronic diseases. You then walk through their office and there's 40 life scientists. Yeah? And then I walk through their office and there's 20 data scientists. And they've got this mix. And governments and National Health Service have put their hands in the pocket and say, we will invest in you as a company, because absolutely we see the approach you're going. You're not taking a technology-only approach. You can see how we fundamentally have to change our approach to it, and because you've shown me and you've demonstrated me, because it's a team sport. There's a great writer, and I encourage you all to read him, a guy called Peter Block. He put a fantastic book out called The Guide to Flawless Consulting, how to get your decision to yes. Brilliant, brilliant book. He wrote a fantastic piece around saying the answer to how is yes. The number of business cases I come across and that I send people back to say, yeah, they come in and tell me how something will work. Never why. I'll give you a classic example this week. A big SI partner rang me up and said, Chris, we really want to work with you going forward. We think we can partner well. We think we've got something to offer to go to market together. Well, I said, yeah, hey, I'm interested in listening. I got on the phone and I said, so Chris, this is how we could work together. You know, we could share pipeline. We could get people together. And he spent an hour telling me how we could work together. And I'm sitting there going, he hasn't even told me why we need to work together. Completely missed the point of why we could work together. And what Peter says is put a moratorium on the word how. At some point you have to answer, how am I going to do that? But if you just hold off for a while and say, the answer to how is yes. All the people there with their technologies, all the technology people you've seen, basically our technology, Orange are not going to launch a phone if it doesn't work, very unlikely, yeah? Vodafone are not going to launch a phone. So their technology basically works. The answer to how is yes. The answer to why, and lots of people go to the how question. I could put any subject on the table and people will ask me, well, how will you do that? World peace, how will that happen? They won't ask me why. And I'm amazed at the number of business cases that actually don't have the why in it. And whether that's just, I don't know how to articulate that, I'm scared to really talk about that. So the answer to how is yes, and that would be one of the big advices I would give to you. And this comes down to this one, proof of value versus proof of concept. This is an interesting one. Proof of concept has moved into a technology bake-off. Yeah? If you're trying to make something real for somebody in the business context, and I've told you, don't talk to them about the technology, that's what they did for the 12 million in Connecting for Health, and it went nowhere. Why would you take that approach in your first engagement with a client? Why would you then say, actually, give me some of your technology and I'll test it? Yeah? Well, because I've done lots of testing, so I know it works, and I'm sure Teradata have done lots of testing, and I know the teaser. I know they've all done lots of testing, and they all work pretty much, yeah? Yeah, we'll test it, and we'll test it for about, and it's amazing I see them, the people that go, I've seen them test them for like months and months and months on end, and I'm sitting thinking, they're missing their business market if they're testing this stuff, yeah? You know, it isn't like 12 months, you've got to get there in 2 days, yeah? You want to test this thing for 20 months, you know? That's part of my thing. I know the phone works. I pick it up and it works when I go. I'm not going to say to Orange, can I test your phone for 3 months before I actually start paying for it? What I absolutely would say is it's a proof of value you need to move for. And a proof of value is where you bring your data, you bring your data scientists, you bring your business model change that you want to do. You bring that into an environment where you actually say, what we're going to build now is we're going to build a new churn model. Or we're going to absolutely put together a new patient pathway, and we're going to build that in a lab environment. And so as we all build it together, because it's a team sport, we're actually going to come out with something that is real for the business. And the guy who runs the business, or the girl, and they sign the check, will understand what they've got, as opposed to, well, actually, this thing is faster than this. Because all you get at the end of a proof of concept is tell someone that it's faster than this. So if you come back to who you're trying to persuade, you know, about drawing growth, wouldn't a proof of value answer saying, actually, I've managed to spot that if so-and-so churns from my business model, their friends on Facebook is 7% more likely to churn, wouldn't that be an interesting bit of insight that a businessman could sign up to and say, actually, I can put that into real value? So I sort of counsel you to look at proof of values more so than proof of concepts and take that concept to heart. However, I put this slide up at my last one, and some of you who were last time will understand who this elephant. Sometimes you just come up against people who have got some ulterior motive to say no to what you're doing. And this is to do with Edison. Now, Edison held most of the patents in direct electricity. Very clever man, held most of the patents. I think he's still in the top 5 patent holders in the UK as he goes. And he had all the patents in direct current, and direct current could travel about that far. And Tesla came in with alternating current. Great thing to innovate, great piece of technology innovation that could allow many new business models to come up. I can now have my factory far away from my power source, yeah, so a number of different business models could stem out of that innovation. Edison, supposedly clever man, said, that's going to cost me money because I've got all the patents in direct. I'm going to go around the world, and he went around the world electrocuting animals, and he electrocuted this elephant in New York to prove that direct current was wrong. To prove that alternating current is dangerous. So you will always come, and in your business cases, you've always got to spot those people who it looks completely logical, and there's some other underlying reason why they're not letting your business innovation move forward. In this case, Edison would have made no money once alternating current came in, and he actually publicly electrocuted the elephant to do it. Anybody wants to talk to me, I'll be outside for the rest of the day. If anyone wants to chat to me, the Greenplum strategy is about building an open analytics platform that will allow you to have any type of data, any type of analytics to run in a collaborative, open environment. Really, that's what I've got to say. Focus on the growth, focus on the fact that it's a business model innovation, and you'll have success in articulating your business models. Thank you very much.